Isolation is something many of us have had to deal with during these last 2+ years with COVID-19 on the heels of every move and around every unsanitized corner. Those of us not living alone can often still feel a bit isolated, but because we aren't able to have our routine, whether it's work, school, or social, Zoom fatigue is a very real thing, and I see it with my students and my friends. It's often much deeper in terms of isolation than we really give it its due credit. Technology is really a gift and affords a visual and a connection, but doesn't replace the beauty and connection we feel being in the actual presence of others. Theater is one of those experiences that is enhanced by the audience around us, by the reaction, by the community interaction, by the sheer feeling of having others witness what we ourselves are experiencing. It makes it all that much more real, sometimes magical, sometimes devastating, but always human, and always leads to a conversation about the topic of the theater production on so many levels. One of the populations devastated by isolation has been teenagers. Teen years are ones of exploration and important connections with peer groups. COVID-19 has caused an unnatural shrinking of their world and has severely impaired this developmental stage for so many of our teens. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, in a national study of over 2,600 teens in grades 10 to 12, reported that well over 50% respondents shared that the pandemic created problems for them. And even further, a subset reported a great deal of moderate or increase in depression. Welcome to Small and Gutsy, our podcast featuring nonprofits and social impact organizations under $10 million. My name is Dr. Laura Witkoff, and I'm excited and proud to be your host. We hope you'll love the stories as much as we do, and perhaps you will find needed services, a job, volunteer, invest in, or donate. Please pass along any valuable information you hear today to others and send me the name of any organization you'd like featured at lwitkoff@gmail.com. That's 2 T's and 2 F's. In episode 28, I had the great privilege of interviewing Los Angeles' 24th Street Theater. We had a blast, and I learned so much about the history of this amazing organization and their deep interest in honoring the importance of families, particularly the young members, to be exposed to tough subjects in ways they could digest, as well as use the opportunity for open discussions with their loved ones. Subjects like loss, love, death, loneliness, to name a few. 24th Street Theater is known for great children's theater with adult-like themes, but they are also known for the diversity they celebrate within their neighborhood, both in culture, language, as well as welcoming the homeless who need a cup of coffee and a spot to rest. I recently learned about their collaboration with the Wallis Annenberg Center for Performing Arts, known locally as the Wallis, a public-private partnership with the City of Beverly Hills that strives to be a site for the convergence of relevant, dynamic performing arts, education, and civic life. The collaboration allows the 24th Street Theater to bring a production to a broader audience, and what a great opportunity for two like-minded entities to spread the word of great, thought-provoking theater. In 2019, 24th Street Theater commissioned the British playwright Mike Kenny, best known for his play Walking the Tightrope, to write an adaptation of the fairy tale Rapunzel. Most of us are very familiar with that. But this was in response to the huge rise in the feeling of isolation among teens. Over the course of the past 2 years of the pandemic, with lockdown, social uprising, election insurrection, climate calamities, global interventions, and war, often bringing tremendous anxiety to all of us, and certainly to the younger generation, the play continued to evolve as the world continued to change. Let me set the scene, and then I can't wait to reintroduce you to 3 of our guests from 24th Street Theater and introduce you to one from the Wallis. It's 1944, and the war rages on in London. With her mom and dad on the front line, Letty is evacuated to the country, where she finds refuge on Miss Pierce's farm. But at what price? Is finding safety for a 12-year-old mixed-race city girl in a rural, homogeneous community akin to isolating her in a tower? What a wonderful metaphor for families to discuss when thinking about feeling isolated, whether due to a pandemic or a challenging peer group. Rapunzel Alone is set to premiere this March in 2 locations, 24th Street Theater and the Wallis. I am absolutely delighted to re-welcome Jay McAdams, Executive Director of 24th Street Theater, Debbie Devine, Artistic Director of 24th Street Theater, Jesus Castanos Chima, also known as Chima, Associate Artistic Director, and Mark Slavkin, Director of Education, The Wallis. So let's get started. Welcome, Jay, Debbie, Chima, and Mark. First, I'd love to know, how did this collaboration come to be? And I'd love to hear about your passion for bringing this kind of theater to young folks.
I'm Debbie Devine, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Laura. It's just wonderful to be able to share our passion, as you described it. How it began was the opportunity that we had to do Walking the Tightrope with Mike Kenny several years ago. And I saw in his canon, he had a version of Rapunzel, and it was not quite what was in my mind. You're so right about the isolation that teens were experiencing. So I contacted him and I said, how about another version that really reflects just the social agony that teens are going through? And he said, oh, yes. And it was both a commissioned piece, which it absolutely is, and then the just the joy I've had of collaborating, building it, and dramaturging it with him, and then not sure we were going to be able to get it on the wonderful Wallis stage. We did an audio version of it, and now we're going to do the stage version. So I'm doing cartwheels.
Debbie, you use such a great word, agony. I think we have underestimated the feelings of agony. If we can put it in a place like a theater production where people get to digest it in a lens that allows them to have discussions of what it might feel like for someone else, and they've also felt that way, it just makes a beautiful and remarkable catharsis for teens, because then you don't really feel entirely alone.
And you know, the teen suicide numbers and everything were off the charts pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
I mean, it
true.
was an issue in 2019 that, you know, school districts around the country were trying to resolve. Las Vegas had a huge increase. Yeah. Layer on everything from the last 2 years, and, you know, yikes.
Yeah. Mark, I'm going to toss it to you, being the kind of new voice here from the Wallis.
The old voice. No, I just want to acknowledge my colleague, Paul Cruz, who recently moved back to the UK, sadly for us. But Paul was instrumental in making this project happen. And for Paul, it always starts with the people more than necessarily the work of art or the show. Paul's like, yeah, we'll get to the show, but tell me about the people. And when he wants to work with folks that he respects, then out of a process of collaboration, the show emerges or the right project emerges. Paul happened to know Mike Kenny separately, which is great. And Paul brought a similar aesthetic. I don't know that Jay and Debbie and I have talked about it, but Paul sort of cringed at the idea of theater for young audiences or children's theater. His instinct was young people can engage with, understand, feel much more than we give them credit for. And we shouldn't dumb things down. We shouldn't make such cutesy, saccharine kind of work, that kids have a lot more to offer and understand than we know, and that when they see theater in a mixed audience in terms of people of all ages, that's a better experience for everybody. But I think that aesthetic, it's going to be great theater. It's going to be meaningful for all audiences. We think it can be accessible for young audiences, is really important for us at the Wallis. We've done very little that would just be, quote, children's theater. And so I think that value or aesthetic really tracks with how Debbie and Jay kind of devised 24th Street Theater and the work that they do. So it's really been a great match. And I only say I don't want to jinx it, because anytime we can have actors on stage and an audience in the theater right now feels very, very special and a little bit fragile. So fingers crossed that the stars will continue to align, because we can't wait to have this in March.
You know, those of us who create work for young audiences or for multi-generational audiences in the U.S. anyway. It's much more sophisticated. The European children's theater model is much more sophisticated than here. And it's rare that we find like-minded artists in America that share our our desire to make it a little more more sophisticated. And Mike Kenny, by the way, is one of the playwrights that the few playwrights that in the world of children's theater for young audiences, TYA, that fits that bill for us, that writes really substantive material. So this was a beautiful aligning of the stars. And then that Paul, when we were talking to him, when we told him we wanted to do a Mike Kenny piece, he's like, he's a buddy of mine.
What a wonderful, Jay, both what you and Mark said, in terms of, I think about the concept of thought-provoking isn't a bad thing. And I really appreciated what Mark said about I always think if something is too saccharine, it has the expectation that life reflects that, and it's only that. And so then what do you do when you have alternative feelings, particularly as an older youth or an adolescent? You don't know what to do with those feelings because what you've only been exposed to is what it's supposed to be, and you don't know how to get there. So it's hard for kids to work through that if they don't have a space to be able to do that.
That word is beautiful. In the education community, which we are very much connected to, a big part of the jargon, the lexicon, the language is, let's make it a safe space. Let's make it a safe space. And that's been misinterpreted to the point that what Mark is saying is there's no risk involved. So the progressive and smart educators that we work with say, well, let's also make it a brave space.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And they're actually saying that at the college level. Like they're trying to find spaces for people to have these conversations that are rich but protective so that people can really share.
Right.
And I think that's what you both are creating, having embarked on this.
The overprotection of your 8-year-old is disallowing them the catharsis that they need in storytelling.
Right.
And that's why we're so lucky to be aligned with the Wallis who gets it, and our audiences who get it, and that's exactly right, Mark. To be able to be in a mixed audience where kids look around and maybe they don't understand. Maybe there's an adult crying or a middle school person laughing. They know that they're in a room where something is happening and they need to reach up, and that's a big part of just our brand and our belief.
Chima, I want to bring you into the conversation as the Associate Artistic Director. What's your role in this project? And then I want to get to some of the detail of the project. I did get a chance to listen to the audio, so I feel super privileged in that way.
Yeah, I'm co-directing with Debbie, which is, I'm very excited about it. Just working next to her because, everybody knows how great Debbie is. And I have to say it because it's true. And
because she's the boss, right?
Because she's the boss. She's the boss. No, I have to talk. Yeah, I have to say good things about her.
So I want to know, for those of you who listened to the last episode, if Chima's going to stay up all night because the bumper of the milk truck doesn't fall off at the right cue. So if you don't know that inside joke, you better listen to the other podcast.
We've been working for many years. She directed me a few times, and I've been assisting her in plays and co-directing. This time, I don't see much difference because I'm always doing the same thing. I'm just trying to just throw what I think about the play, about my ideas, about in any sense, staging, acting. Working with Debbie is everything's about fun, learning while having fun. When Debbie told me about this project, about this play, when I read it, I immediately fell in love with this easy play. That's that's the kind of play that we do. Easy ones. Especially when I saw all these issues that the play was about. The isolation, connection, racial issues, and also because the playwright was Mike Kenny, because we know him from Walking the Tightrope. And I think Mike he's such an amazing playwright. He's very smart and sensitive, and he always finds the right balance especially on these issues, because these are very delicate issues that to deal with. And I think he finds exactly the balance that it needs to go up.
What's brilliant about Mike Kenny is he doesn't write any stage directions.
Interesting.
Only poetry. It's only poetry. And this is what I loved about Walking the Tightrope. As a director, nobody's telling me what to do. I can do it. I can conceive it. I can figure it out myself. There isn't any. And then she crosses downstage and drinks out of the, This is what's brilliant about Chima, is that he, so here is a blank slate, except for poetry. So together, we've been staging this and trying to problem solve. How do we lift up this poetry in these different settings? World War II, the mixed race girl comes and lives with a woman who is considered a witch, and their isolation and disconnection. You said at the beginning, you said, the unnatural shrinking of their world. Well, and that's the pandemic. But in this time and place, it was the war. And so she turns, up at in this farm with this woman who's just really difficult and has been isolated herself and doesn't want anybody, she thought she was going to get a boy probably, right? That will help
her. Who could help on the farm, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And she got this, frightened little city girl, and they're just
didn't want to
clashing.
get dirty.
Didn't want to get dirty. Right. Yeah, so it's that clash, and then how this story evolves.
I want to hear a little bit about how Mark spoke a little bit about the collaboration and Paul was so excited. And then I'd love for you to walk us through, sort of move it along the path. Like, how did you all say, hey, we could really do this together? Maybe we could do it in both theaters. How did that come about?
Paul actually came here and saw the work we do with schools.
Great.
Which is also pretty unique, and nobody really does what we do with schools, the way we do it. And he saw that and said, "Wow, we've got to get you guys to the Wallis. What would it be?" And we told him about our Mike Kenny project, and he was really excited. So it really was more of an a collaboration between the people than the actual project.
Project emerged from the people connection, and so it begs the question. Share a little bit about how you approach education or schools, and is that something in the future that the Wallis would want to adopt into their own educational programming?
What do you think, Mark?
Not to put you on the spot, Mark. We're planning the future.
We've actually built some curriculum, Mark, around this. We're excited to share.
And school performances are part of what Mark's working on, and then we'll do them here as well. So we'll have student matinees of Rapunzel.
Yeah, no, I was going to say in both theaters, so that young people are invited both to 24th Street and to the Wallis to see the show, which is fantastic and rare in the performing arts world. There are often like these exclusivity rules that you can't do that show within so many 100 miles or something. And that's really not our belief system anyway, but I do want to call it out as being a little bit unique. I mean, we at the Wallis are committed to giving young people, and I'm thinking now K through 12, opportunity to see work in theater, music, and dance. And depending on the artist and the show, we'll focus on different age groups. Obviously, certain works work better for kindergarten. Like The Ugly Duckling was probably a better fit for kindergarten, and there are other things that we do that are, much more provocative or difficult for high school or older students. And Paul and I always wrestle with the idea of this mixed audience. So my inclination coming to the Wallis was to, do these student matinees, bringing school groups during the day as a field trip. And really, Paul pushed, and I agreed, let's also invite school groups to evening performances. There's like one class, and the rest of the theater are adults. That will give them, the young people, a different lens into what theater is. So yeah, that commitment runs deep in both organizations. The Wallis, before we opened in 2013, along the way, it was announced that the Wallis would only be children's theater. We evolved in the planning to be broader and to be more general Center for the Performing Arts. But that commitment to young audiences or theater for young audiences is in our DNA at the Wallis. And And this is an example that resonates with that value, serving young people, but doing it in a way that isn't talking down to them, is calling them into just compelling stories.
Walk us through the audio piece that you tested, which is fabulous. And then I want to get into the nuts and bolts of how are you planning and thinking of it. So I don't know who wants to
Well,
take
the audio
that on.
piece was
Jen.
Deb's idea because we actually, originally we were scheduled to do this at the Wallis. We commissioned Mike, I think, 2019. It was going to be 2020, I think. It's been moved, as the pandemic and everything's closed, it's been moved a few times. So, and like Mark said, we're fingers crossed. It feels like we're on a wave here in good timing. Debbie, in the middle of the pandemic, came up with this idea because she's directed some theater works for radio before. And
It's wonderful Susan Lowenberg, LA Theater Works.
right, who's kind of the pioneer of it in LA.
So I learned a little bit about that and thought, why can't this end? Because it's such beautiful poetry. We talked Mike into doing the narration.
So you actually hear the playwright in our
I
audio
didn't realize
version.
that when I listened. I thought it was great.
Yes.
Yeah, and because of the time difference, he was like, in his literally like in his closet for sound buffering
One
at
in
3
the
in the
morning.
morning, doing audio
He's
tape.
a trooper. I give him a lot of
Oh
credit.
my
That's
God,
great.
He's the real deal theater
Yeah.
guy.
We love him. So then we did that. We made the audio play, and I'm interested, Laura, I'm going to interview you here in a minute about
No problem.
your reaction to it. And then Mark and Jay and I were concerned because just the age group would coming to the Wallis, they needed to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
We weren't at the time being
That
able to
they-
vaccinate young kids. It was middle school and high school kids. So we wanted to do, how did it play out, the audio to middle school kids? Was it, too childish? Was it just perfect? What was it? And so they listened to it, and then we zoomed in on a Zoom call. And I thought, Mark, they were wonderful, and they had some really compelling. And Mike was there too.
And how old were these students?
These are middle school students at Beverly Vista Middle School in Beverly Hills. Yeah, with a great teacher, Fred Pinto, who helped us make it happen.
So without revealing too much, because of course I want everyone to go to the theater, what were some of the insights the kids shared with you, if you can remember?
The prejudice, they understood about that. They were really interested in, as they called it, which was so cute, the playwriter.
Yeah, I love it.
They
That's
really
so cute.
I wanted to talk to the playwriter, and ask him where he got
That's
his
so
ideas,
great. I
and
love it.
how he felt about the characters, and we realized it was so great that when
Wow.
Mark set this up, because we realized it resonated with them. One of the things that was a challenge for this was less for the audio, was casting. We had actors in New York.
Yeah, the audio play we did live with an audio engineer online mixing
Not
everything.
live for an audience, but when we recorded.
Right, but in real
Yeah.
time. So that's why Mike was having to record in the middle of the night there. So we had Mike in the UK. We had actors in New York City, Atlanta, and Los Angeles, all
Wow.
doing scenes together in real time, and then being mixed. And so we were having to hold for thunderstorms in Atlanta, sirens in New York. It was hilarious.
It was amazing.
I was amazed at how great it was. I felt I was back in the 40s listening on the radio.
Well, right.
I mean, not that I was born then, but that's what I would have imagined.
heard about
okay?
it.
Tell her about it, Mark. How was it in the
Oh man! But I really felt the throwback because you hear the planes and you hear. I mean, it was beautifully done.
That was Jeff Gardner, our
Jeff
sound
Gardner,
designer.
he's just genius.
Right.
And it wasn't on Zoom. It was on a platform called
different-
Riverside.
I was going to say, so unusual to have an existing audio play of a theater piece that allows people of all ages to experience the story in advance. I mean, I would love to have that for everything. Obviously, we don't, but it's a great resource. We've been sharing it with the schools that will be coming to the Wallis.
And it's not unlike people who, this sounds funny, but people who saw Hamilton after they had learned all the music.
Right.
Right.
There's
Right,
something very connecting. And for me, it's like reading a book and then
Yes.
seeing it come to life. So it reinforces the messaging, and you have an image in your head, and then it might be a different image on the stage, and somehow you merge those. But I think it's all part of that journey of creativity and artistic expression. I can see why those students said they really wanted to understand the process of the playwriter, which I love. I just love that.
The live version, the play version, visually, I mean, it's the same script. Much of that sound design that you heard will be done live. So it's the same story, but visually, when I hear it, I hear a very traditional story. Like when I see the movie on the audio version in my head, I'm seeing it very all based in realism. You know, I'm seeing the external scenes out, you know, slopping the pigs and feeding the cows on the farm, that kind of thing. But what Deb and Chima are putting together live for the stage is a very suggestive, a lot of pantomime.
Oh, I love it.
Video design is a heavy piece of it. You know, the set is scrim, so you'll see things emerging. So it's a very theatrical, visual stage production, which is kind of different than what I heard when I heard the audio.
And that's another challenge for us, because, you know, people who have listened to the audio play, you know, they already have their play in their mind. So when they come to see it, they might be disappointed, you know, not seeing what they thought.
It's a great point, Chima. And at the same time, hopefully we have the ability in our brains to adapt to being open to an interpretation that we may not have thought of. And again, I go back to those students who were so interested in the process of the playwright, because they have their own stories. And so how do you come up with a way to communicate it that's interesting and engaging? And so there's a lesson in all of this. I remember a long, long time ago, and I lived on the East Coast, I read Ahab's Wife, which is one of still my favorite books. And I had an image, and then I actually went to the whaling town where it was set, and I went on the boats and saw the different components. And it came alive for me in a way that was so moving in a way. And I think the same thing can happen. And I think that you are so well known, from what I gather, of creating an opportunity for the viewer to have whatever you present come to them, and they get to digest it in a certain way. And I love that, because it's different than theater being fed to you. You're requiring something of your audience, not only on a one-to-one, but also in a community, both for adults and for young people to question and not understand or try to figure it out. And I think it's a level of sophistication, Mark, you said this earlier, the young people are quite capable of, not only in thematics, but also in the artistic design. So I commend you all for taking this on, not in a flat way, in a really engaging, creative mechanism to be able to do that. And you have the free reign to do it, which is wonderful.
And thank you for that. It is really, it is a huge part of our philosophy, is that theater is practicing your imagination.
Yeah, I love that.
You absolutely have to, in the work that we do, you've got to see it and believe it and imagine it yourself.
That's one of the few art forms left that
otherwise,
can do that.
Right. Otherwise, you know, it's film or do it on film then.
We have kind of a rule that we don't do kind of kitchen set realism at our theater.
I love that.
You rarely see a sofa on our set, and if you do,
I'm sleeping on it.
In between things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It also can be the inverse too, Laura. I'm thinking 90% of our viewers who come are not going to have heard it. So it's interesting too to think, well, if they see it first, and then we invite them to listen to it, what would that reaction be?
I think that's a great question. And I also have, of course, I have this kind of idea that as people are coming into the theater, wouldn't it be interesting to have it rolling and playing?
Kind of a thread of that idea. Several of our designers are working on things as audiences entering that are era related.
Perfect.
You know.
So I want you to share, what are the dates at which theater? Give us the lay of the land here, because I want to get as many people in the LA area to come and visit.
We'll be opening here at 24th Street Theater the weekend of March 5th. And we do it, like I said, we open it here. Then the next weekend, March 12th, we will open at the Wallis, the 12th and 13th. And then the following week, we'll have our school matinees at the Wallis.
Great.
I think that's the 15th. Another weekend at the Wallis, the 19th. The
Back to
following
20
week,
back to
back
20.
here, and then the month of April, we'll be having school day matinees
And weekend
here,
performances.
and weekend performances.
That's great. So you really have 2 months that folks
Right.
can
Right.
go either to one theater or the other. And should they get online to either the Wallis or
Yes.
the 24th Street
Yes.
Theater and purchase a ticket?
Online also is not the audio, which is great to hear, but is Letty, who's the character, the mixed race girl who comes from the city,
Yeah.
and lives, is her sketchbook. Her character is doesn't read or write. That's one of the things she struggles with.
Yeah.
But she's a brilliant
sketches.
illustrator. She sketches.
an artist, yeah.
So we've built a sketchbook that we hired a high school student to create. If you haven't seen them, they're really great
That's
sketches.
fabulous.
And using some of those sketches actually in our production.
I want to ask you all, and without giving away the entire play, if you were to choose one piece of it that really speaks to you, I'm going to give each of you a chance. I'd love to hear what for you is particularly compelling.
There is one scene in the play that is pure poetry that it really summarizes, what we talk about in the play about isolation, connection, and racial issues. Is where Miss Pierce is trying to explain to Letty why she has decided to be isolated in the farm, and she speaks about nature, about how nature doesn't discriminate. She talks about the trees, the sky, the stars. They are there for us, for all of us. Without any discrimination. So that's the scene that I really love. I mean, I love all of them, but I just thought about that because I really like that one.
Well, I love the era because I just think it's really rich. I mean, World War II was just an event like no other, in our history, and it was in an era where there was video, and we know what Winston Churchill looked like and sounded like, and all that kind of stuff. The Blitz, it's all very well documented. So to me, I love that it's historical fiction. But the scene that specifically that to me is my favorite is when at the end you've got some characters conflict, which is the gold of theater, right? But at the end, there's a turning point where you see all of the frustration of these characters melt away, and they just become humans for a minute, dealing with each other. It's where that thing happens with Conrad. I don't want to give it away, but to me that is just such a beautiful moment where nothing matters now but an adult with a child in a real moment, and how do you handle that properly?
Don't you wish on some level that we could all get to that place of basic humanity?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry to say
we
that,
need.
but it's like what we need. This is so well timed, you all, which you probably knew anyway, even though it was delayed. It just has this richness.
I'm going to be indulgent and do two. One is the other character in the story is a goose. And we've created a brilliant puppet that is manipulated. And that relationship between the goose and the girl, and how you can have a relationship with another species.
Oh, I love that.
Find there's conflict, and then to find love and respect, and have it be authentic and real and not cartoony. And an animal can understand your needs. And that nature, again, as Jima said, is such a critical part of what Letty, the kid, is learning. The other thing in the stage production, it's silence. We couldn't have silence in radio. You had to keep it going.
Oh, that's such a good
It had to be sound.
point.
But I'm able to see Miss Pierce, who is just agonizingly armored, to see her vulnerability and her loneliness in silence. That's a delicious thing I'm able to discover. We've been able to discover that you couldn't do on the radio.
And it's such an illustration of those of us in our lives who are so well defended or armored, what you used, which is such a beautiful visual, that they cannot risk the vulnerability of softening because their injury is so deep. And so to recognize that, very often children and, teenagers sometimes in situations take that defense as their failure.
Right.
Versus that something's going on. So to have that be seen in this way is instructive. Mark, what about you?
Over the years, I've been involved in several different shows connected to World War II by accident, by design. The ones that are most effective take this epic historic event and make it about a single person or maybe two people. To present it at human scale where otherwise you're lost, that there were like 1 million or 1 billion or 1 trillion people had this, that, or the other happen to them. We can't deal with that. So making it about a young girl or the girl and the woman that she stayed with, I think is really important. The other thing, though, I don't want people listening to think this is like an after-school special about World War II. It's very engaging. It's very entertaining. But as we've been planning for this, young people in Afghanistan have been displaced and sent to the United States to try to make a life. Young people sent by themselves from Honduras or other parts of Central America to make it by themselves. Many of them are in LA. We don't even know it, but they're just here in this strange land. So that issue of being alien, being not just isolated, but being different, the racial overlay of being teased or bullied. I just felt so many of those things are so timely and maybe ironic because you think we're pulling from World War II, but the playwright Mike Kenny is alive and well now. So we know that current realities are in his head in addition to all the research and so on.
When it's a single individual and it's a piece of her story that we can see ourselves in, we naturally, hopefully, think about current and it's still going on. And I love that you said that because just because it's set as a period piece to an extent, it isn't.
It's always great to be able to, and we do this a lot actually, you're making me think about this, is that we have a historic setting so that we can really,
talk about now.
Talk about death, talk about loneliness, talk about despair, talk about all the things,
Dinner's fun at our house.
Jealousy. It protects the kids for a minute. Then they let it percolate and they realize, oh, wait, it's about how I feel now.
Right.
So it's a way to look at now always. We always like to look at now through the past.
And it's not Mark's right, this is not a play about World War II and it's not a war play because you think war and kids, what, are you crazy?
Yeah.
We're looking for that dramatic, edgy, gritty backdrop. Mm-hmm. This is a very sweet play. Yeah. It's a fun play. It's not a dark, awful piece fragile. To bring your children to.
It's fragile, actually.
But it's about humans.
But there's a piece that has to be and should be thought-provoking, where what's great about it is the connection with curriculum, as Mark pointed out in terms of what you can do with it, is you can bring up current events or even someone's own experience, particularly in LA. What a gift, particularly for a class that is kids who from all over. And it's because what you're about is not theater, you're about education and enlightening and engaging and providing a safe space that becomes a brave space. I'm using your language, but it's so true.
Mark mentioned scale a while ago. I didn't know until we started doing this project. In Britain, when in 44, when they really leveled London, they sent over 600,000 kids on trains, all the city dwellers in London. And this was a national program that went on for over a year. They put all their kids, pinned a letter to their coats, not knowing where the kids were going to end up, who was going to be taking care of them, how their kid, the government was looking after them and they had chaperones and whatnot, but they made it work. The whole country pulled together. Can you imagine that today? Can you?
Everybody together getting along and protecting our children.
Even on Zoom, how could that work?
But it's a great point that you raise, is what does it take for us to think about the collective, positive versus the individualist, and you have to come together. Should we wear masks? Masks is an example of trying to protect ourselves and others. That's the goal of it. And could we pull together and all wear masks, even though I don't like teaching in a mask for 6 hours in a day with a 2-hour lunch break or whatever. It's a long day of, breathing in my own oxygen.
So far, the answer is
yes. No.
We cannot.
Yes, we can't work together. But the answer to your question, Laura, is yes, we should all wear masks. Yes.
Yeah.
For the
Our
collective
country
good.
has yet to come together on such a should be a simple.
Yeah. Mark, you can see why we love this car. I love talking to these folks. Okay, Chima, you've been like, hey, I have something to say here.
No, because I think that's pretty interesting what Jay said about, when you do the research about World War II, you find out about little details that it might not be said in the play, but they're important for us, just to build the general context and for the actors to build their characters and emotions. And, like, for instance, the bombs, the whistle. I didn't know that they built that, the whistle just to scare people even more. Like when the bomb was falling, was they put it on purpose there. And also the handkerchiefs, the families used to write things on the handkerchiefs for the soldiers, just to, they remember them, when they feel alone, like they used to just read the messages on the handkerchiefs. And there were so many things that, that I didn't know. And I found out, when doing the research for the play.
It's a beautiful story that has so many different access points for learning and growing. And I really love that you all have taken this on and that two like-minded theaters got together and said, this is important and we want more people to come. And it's remarkable. This episode is sponsored by the Intrinsic Group, my boutique management consulting firm specializing in guiding organizations to leverage talent, optimize processes, and to ensure the organization's narrative is aligned with their culture. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, please reach out to us. To see all the small but mighty organizations we featured, check out our incredible infographics in the stories section of the Intrinsic Group website. So as you all know, but Mark may not know, at the end of my podcast, I always have a round of quick and gutsy questions. What is the top of your wish list for Rapunzel Alone? Because I think that's what we're really talking about. But the answer can't be money or funding. So what is at the top of your wish list?
Audience!
Just to be able to run all the season.
I think my wish list would be that it carries on at other theaters in the future, and more people that see the work, the better. It's a beautiful piece of art.
Yeah, that's the whole premise behind Small and Gutsy. The more we can get it out there, the more visibility comes your way. And Mark, what about you for Rapunzel Alone?
Yeah, just that as young people are leaving the theater and getting back on the school bus, that we have changed the arc of their growth and development, if even a little bit, to give them new ways of seeing the world, new ways of thinking about themselves, new ways of thinking about those who are different than them. I mean, if we just get a little of that into their heads, to me, that would be really successful.
Okay, that's actually my answer.
I want that too.
Yeah, me too.
Mark, you're officially elected as the spokesperson for the top of the wish list for Rapunzel Alone. We just elected you. If you were to think of a song that describes Rapunzel Alone, it doesn't have to describe it per se, but how you think about it. Could be any song. I don't want it to be era specific, as we talked about. That's irrelevant in some ways. What would it be? So what song comes to mind when you think of Rapunzel Alone?
You Are My Sunshine?
Oh, God.
I love it.
Green by Joni Mitchell, a story of having to let go of her daughter and put her up for adoption or have them go away and live with the father. And just the mother's ache of being separated from their child, but thinking it's for the right reason.
Think of all those people who did put their kids on a train because they didn't want them to be bond, right? I mean, it's beautiful. It's great. That's wonderful.
I love that. What is the name of the song? The Mother's Grief in Dear Evan Hansen. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. But her lament, I'm thinking about the mother who's not in the majority of our story, but that would be just the ache.
Chima, what about you?
I think I said this before, but I don't know. I think about Imagine by John Lennon.
Because it's so much of what theater allows you to do.
So big, so small. Is that the Dear Evan Hansen song?
Oh, thank you. That's great. What makes Rapunzel Alone gutsy? Because it's gutsy.
I think the artists that made it, all the way from Paul to Mike to how Deb's directing it, to the great sound design and things you heard on the audio, the video design that's coming, the kid, artist who helped come up with it. I mean, all those elements together, everybody's on the same page. We're not doing children's theater. This is a piece of theater that kids are really going to benefit from, but if you have no kids, this is also for you.
The content of how we're handling racism in a child experiencing it really in a different way, and how she is helping this woman who's so marginalized from being, because she's Black, has been called a witch, like the fairy tale, and is why she isolates herself, and how this child helps her understand her heart and that how you have to stand up to racism and bigotry.
Well, even though the project was born before the pandemic, doing anything during the pandemic is gutsy and brave, and just the act of creating theater in general. It's this enormous labor of love, but a lot of labor. With the hope, which is always kind of against the odds, that lots of people are going to come and see it and value it and appreciate it. There's something just daring and gutsy and risk-taking about it. And this show, something that I grappled with, we've talked a little bit about, the title Rapunzel Alone is gutsy in the way that we're trying to thread the needle between a well-known fairy tale, but that carries its own kind of baggage of what that is, and this World War II setting and all of that. It's not an obvious choice. I'll just put it that way. So there's something gutsy about saying, we're going to go for it. And we know good work is good work and people will respond. But it's not the obvious, what's the blockbuster we can do coming out of the pandemic that will be guaranteed, whatever. I'm not sure this is it, but it is fantastic. And I'm so proud that it's happening.
It's a piece that needs to be out there, and you guys are the ones who've chosen to collaborate and do it. That's gutsy in and of itself. Chima, what about you? What do you think makes Rapunzel Alone gutsy?
Resilience, because, all the struggle that we have to go through in order to make it happen, because, and we just were pushing and pushing and, and now it's happening.
What is something that outsiders or maybe even a few insiders don't know about Rapunzel Alone?
I think that little thing that I shared with you earlier is not widely known by Americans today, that, this was a massive movement. I remember, I think it's Catherine Wheel's Theatre of Scotland some years ago did a production about Lifeboat. You guys had it at the Wallis, and it's been around ever. That was kind of a similar thing, but where they put a lot of the kids on boats and sent them off too.
Yeah.
I mean, again, that to me was just so. Talk about gutsy.
Yeah.
And I just can't imagine us doing that under any circumstances here, or ever where we would even have to here. But it was another time, and the fact that. To me, that's just a stunning fact that's a little jaw-dropping, that it worked out, that they took care of each other.
Yeah. Debbie, Mark, and Chima, what is something that outsiders or maybe a few insiders don't know about Rapunzel Alone?
Well, originally it was written with, as Mike and I worked on it together, for 5 characters.
Interesting.
And so we created it, and he didn't know who was going to be the narration. He didn't know who was going to narrate it. We were going to give a narration to each one of the characters so they would come out, break the fourth wall and do a little narration. And when I said, you narrate it and we'll just do the audio. And now that's what the stage production is. Him doing the audio, and we've got it down to 3 characters, 3 actors that are carrying this story.
Well, I would just build on what Debbie said, and I'm hearing this sort of secondhand a little bit through Paul Cruz, our artistic director. But the show was born before the pandemic, and when the pandemic happened, it made Paul think differently about it and encouraging some new looks to make it relevant in this once in a billion lifetime moment. And that may not be obvious to everybody coming to see it, but it is life influencing art, art influencing life. Yeah.
And Chima, what about you? Anything that comes to mind?
Not everybody knows that there is a radio version of it that is available to listen to it.
And the sketchbook, people
Yes.
And a sketchbook, exactly. That's another one.
One last question from my quick and gutsies. If you could get one celebrity or influencer to talk about Rapunzel Alone, to get people to come to the theater during these 2 months, who might that be? Who do you want to bring on and say, you got to help us get as many people here? It's so important.
No, it's funny because a lot of people know that Debbie was Jack Black's teacher when he was a kid, and he's been just such a huge help to us over our quarter of a century now that 24th Street's been going. We were initially talking with Jack, and he agreed to do it. He was going to be the voice of the goose.
Just the honking.
Yeah, but we thought,
cool,
well, Jack's so fun and interesting, and and he's got this big appeal with Shark Tales and Panda, Kung Fu Panda. And I mean, everybody all over the world knows Jack Black. But we ended up going a different direction because as the story evolved, we realized, and Jack too, that, the goose kind of became a different character, and it couldn't be bigger than life.
But he would be the celebrity. He's actually joining us on the 13th. Mark, I hope you can come to see the show and to absolutely have it, because he's that bridge between adults and kids. He can actually do that and is a big supporter of what we do. So we together see Jack.
And whoever the biggest British star is today, I don't know who that is, because most of the actors on TV I see are British anymore.
Right, Jack, get everybody you know to come.
Yeah.
Okay. And anybody else, Mark or Chima?
I can remember the name of this girl, this poet girl who was in
Amanda
Biden's.
Gorman.
Yes, exactly. That would be nice to have.
Maybe you send her a ticket.
Good idea.
Or send her the audio, or send her the sketchbook, or send her something.
She lives in the area, right?
She went to the same high school my son did and was in his graduating class.
Oh, really?
From New Roads, yeah. And so she was, I remember, I think I've even said this on a previous podcast, I don't know, but at his graduation, my mom was with me. We're watching my son graduate. She did, I think she had been the LA Poet Laureate at that time. She was only 18. She has a twin sister. She got up and did a speech for the class, the class speech or a poem. I just remember turning to my mother and saying, oh my, she's amazing. And this was well before her notoriety. She just could put language and words together in the most beautiful way that I, much older than 18, still can't do. She's just remarkable. So yes, I love that. Great response. Yeah. And Mark, what about you?
Meghan Markle.
Great idea. Actually, great idea. She's also little, as we know. Yep. You guys are just a wealth of ideas. That's all I'm going to say. So
You're like our agent.
I love it. I love you guys. All of you collectively. I could do this. I could just focus my podcast on your theater productions over the. I would let. Nothing would make me happier.
Okay.
So, okay, you got a date, and we'll see. So we're getting to the place where I want you to share the website where folks need to go to purchase, listen to the audio if they choose to, the sketchbook, anything. So. Debbie and Jay, you start the website and where they go for 24th Street Theater, and then Mark for the Wallis.
So 24th Street Theater's website is easy, www.24thstreet.org. And they can buy a ticket. We also have a link on our site, so you can buy a ticket for shows at the Wallis those 2 weeks, or the the ones at 24th Street.
And Mark?
The Wallis, WALLIS is in Sam, thewallis.org. And from our main homepage, all the upcoming shows are there to buy tickets.
I just
I've never been to the Wallis. It is a
Beautiful
gorgeous, the old
place.
post office in Beverly Hills.
It's just beautiful.
I always want to run up and down that beautiful marble hallway and slide in my socks.
And Laura, there's not we're an intimate theater, 24th Street Theater, and there's not an intimate theater in this city that wouldn't be honored to be presenting and working with the Wallis, and we are lucky enough to have that connection and being able to show our art there. We're just really thrilled.
I think that's beautiful, a beautiful sentiment, Debbie, because smaller theaters struggle in different ways. And to be able to partner with a presence like the Wallis is beautiful for both of you. But I understand that this is an opportunity for the Wallis to really embrace the city of LA in a way that is beautiful for the whole city. And so I appreciate that this occurred, and I am incredibly grateful that you all have spent the last bit of time with me for this interview. It was enlightening, wonderful, always enjoyable, and it's great to see familiar faces, and Mark, to see you again. Even though I hadn't interviewed you before, anytime in the future. And Debbie, Jay, and Chima, I'm a huge fan. So,
it's mutual.
It's
always
mutual.
a pleasure, Laura.
True.
I think you guys are inspiring, and I'm always in awe. And from the first time I met Debbie, Jay, and Chima, I was like, these are my friends. I like them. And Mark and I have known each other, so we've had that experience in person. And so this was just something I was super excited about, and so grateful that you could all make the time. You allow me to go to some deep places with you that touch my heart, and I want you all
You're
to
a great
know
interviewer.
Yeah, Laura, you really are a very good, I'm saying this objectively here. You really are a very good interviewer and quite the wordsmith. You make it fun and engaging and connective. Bravo.
And your background as a social worker just
You always go to the heart. You
through.
find the heart every time.
Some people in my family don't really like that. I dig a little too deep,
We'll talk to them about
Yeah,
it.
I do. Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, give us some stars, and write a review on wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're interested in sponsoring a small and gutsy episode to keep it going, please reach out to me or buy us a coffee at www.buymeacoffee.com/small-and-gutsy. Just an FYI, for those of you who might want to be a small and gutsy patron, we just released our Patreon site with some really fun first edition small and gutsy merchandise. So check us out to support this effort at patreon.com/small-and-gutsy. Of course, we can't take responsibility outside of our own vetting of the organizations we interview, meaning we encourage you to do your own due diligence and research them as well. I want to thank my partners in this endeavor, the Intrinsic Group, the volunteers, my co-producer, sound engineer, and composer, the amazing Pavel Franson, my social media maven, Delania Tirado, my infographic creator extraordinaire, Sonia Fizek, Nate Addy for the exceptional logo, and all the friends and family who have guided and inspired me. A very special thank you to my biggest champion, without whom I could not have created this project, my very best friend and a true sounding board. Thanks, Mark Witkoff. Thanks for being there. From small and gutsy to big with impact, I'm Laura Witkoff, and thanks for listening.